Hi there, Homespun friends. It is so good to see you this morning. We're coming back with another installment of our book study, Having a Mary Heart in a Martha World by Joanna Weaver. And I have been enjoying my reading, and I hope that you have too. Today we are coming up on a question that all of us have asked. Lord, don't you care? Lord, don't you care? How many of us have said that? All of us have said that at one time or another. The scripture says, Martha was distracted by all of the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. So here we see that Martha has gone to Jesus with her problem, and she says, Lord, don't you even care about me? Can't you see that I'm doing all the work? Deep inside, I'm sure Martha wanted to be doing what Mary was doing. She wanted to be sitting down and resting and staying at the feet of Jesus and listening to all that Jesus was teaching. But she knew that preparations must be made and the guests must be taken care of. And so she was busy doing the work, and she says, can't you see what I'm doing, Lord? Don't you care? And you know, most of us have had a time in our life that we have faced a problem or an issue, and we have said those very words to him. Lord, look at what I'm going through. Can't you see my struggle? Can't you tell that I'm going through this? And where are you? Don't you care about me at all that you would let me go through this? Whether it be a physical pain that you're going through, a relationship pain, emotional pain, whatever it is. And so I decided that today I'm going to tell you the one time in my life that I had to say, Lord, don't you care? Now, I don't say that much anymore. I really don't. I have matured and grown since that time. And I think the closer that we draw to Christ, the less that we're going to be asking him that question. But when I was young, I was getting ready to get married. My husband and I were married 33 years ago. He graduated on Saturday, May the 12th, and then we were married on Mother's Day Sunday afternoon, which is May the 13th. And what an exciting time it was. And leading up to that, we were making preparations to go to seminary. My husband knew that seminary was important, and he had already told our church that we were planning to leave as soon as the summer was done. And as the deacons were talking about it, they asked my husband, what are you going to do after you get married? Where are you going to live? Because you're going to need to live somewhere that you won't need to sign a lease, because you're only going to need to be somewhere for a couple of months. He said, well, I don't know. If worst comes to worst, we'll just stay with my parents. And because his parents live not too far from there. And one of the men said, well, I have an idea. He said, me and my wife, we have a family cabin. It is in the middle of a cow pasture, but it's a pretty log cabin. If you would like to live out there, it's one great big room with a side kitchen and a little side bathroom. It's furnished. It has a bed in there. If you would like to stay there for these couple of months before you go to school, then you're welcome to stay there free of charge. And that's what we did. And it was very exciting. It was picturesque and interesting to stay at a house with cows all around you, but it was a great joy, and what an opportunity to be able to live rent-free in a pretty place while my husband continued to finish out his work. He was working at the church, and then he was also working at Smith's Supermarket, which was a locally owned grocery store that he had worked in since he was in high school. And this is how he helped afford things. He would work, even when he started college, he would work on the weekends. He would come home and work some. He would work in the summertime, and so he knew that by doing both the church work for a couple of months and the supermarket job, we would be able to save a little bit more money as newlyweds getting ready to move to a new place and start school, where we had to pay all of our tuition up front. We knew that this money would be very important to our lives. Now, leading up to our wedding, I had several showers. But all of my stuff that I got for my showers was stored, and I missed it. The cabin was furnished. It had the bedding, had even dishes and pots and pans. So very few of our actual wedding presents or personal items were there. I had pots and pans. My grandmother gave me a sewing machine because she desperately wanted me to learn how to sew. And I had some sewing classes, so but I had aspirations to be a good seamstress. It just didn't really happen. But I cross stitched, and all of that sort of thing. So the sewing was really right down my alley. I enjoyed trying to learn and to. I made a tunic, and I made some other little items. I made a knockoff Cabbage Patch Kid doll. I made that and stuffed it, but those were very popular in the 80s. I did several things with that little sewing machine. Leading up to my wedding. She gave it to me right before my wedding. So during those 2 months, I had left that sewing machine at the cabin and had used it. What else did I get? I had all my china. I had my china. I had 4 place settings and a few pieces to make 6 place settings. I needed to expand on that a little bit. I've had all of my silver was given as gifts. I think I had 4 showers. I had a shower at the church where my husband pastored, one at my parents' church where they pastored. I had a shower given to me by my family and then one given to me by my friends. So I had really been blessed. And all of the things pretty much I needed to start a household, I got them. Now, my husband had been working hard in the years leading up to getting married. Even before he knew me, he had purchased a brass bed that had never been fully unwrapped from the plastic. He took me over to show it to me. He had it in storage. It was gorgeous. It had the headboard, the footboard. It had these pedestals that came up from it. Each little column had a porcelain finial, and each finial was hand painted with flowers all around it. Oh, it was just gorgeous, and I couldn't wait to use it. He had bought a new mattress and box springs as well. We had bought a washer and a dryer. We had bought a chair and a sofa and a coffee table and an end table. What else had we bought? I'm trying to remember the things that we had. I know that I had some quilts. The church that we were pastoring had made me a beautiful yellow and white quilt, and they had all signed, the women had signed the back of it. I had a lap quilt that was made out of tulips, and then I had quilts from my parents' church, which was really my home church. One of them was a double wedding ring quilt, and I had unwrapped it, and then another lady had told me, I will give you this quilt, but it won't be ready until after the wedding is over because I'm working as hard as I can and I can't get it finished. But it was like a Star of Bethlehem quilt, and so that quilt I had never unwrapped. I had it in the box. She had brought it to my mom's house, and it was all wrapped up in pretty paper in this really huge box, and so that was waiting for me in my parents' house, along with a lot of other gifts that I had never opened up. They remained unopened. My parents, people would bring them presents and things even after we were married, and they would just store them in their little building out back that was kind of like an office / storage area. And so I had plenty of things I had never even opened before. And so I was excited. I was excited to get in my new apartments. Now, my husband and I were not able to find a seminary apartment right away. We were on the waiting list, but our name did not come up. So we had to find an alternate plan. And we found a big older home that had been divided into 3 duplex apartments. And we lived in that for several months before we finally got into the seminary housing. And so that's where we were going. And I was determined, even though it was pea green, that was the color of it, and that it was a much older home that did not have the newest amenities. I was going to make that place a show place, man. That was it. I was going to have all my things out there, my quilts and all my pretty things. I couldn't wait to get in that house. And you know how you are when you're a new bride. You're ready. You're ready to get all these things in your home the way that you want them, exactly like you want them. We had a bookcase is another thing that we had, I think. Because my husband had lots of books. But anyway, we worked through the summer. We applied to some jobs in Raleigh where we were going. We both got jobs that paid minimum wage, but we were happy to start out with that because my husband was going to be in school all day. He needed a job that was flexible, that would allow him to work in the evenings and the weekends. And then I got a job at a children's clothier, and that was my very beginning job, and it didn't last very long because I moved on and took another position. But that was my very initial starting job when I first got married, after the 2 months that we first got married, when we stayed back at the church. But when it came time for us to get on our way, we took the moving truck. Now, we had a driver. My husband's mother is in the moving and storage business, and so she lined everything up for us. And the driver went by, and we picked up the brass bed and the washer and the dryer, and we picked up the sofa and the chair and some other belongings that my husband had. Our car was loaded down with books. My husband loves commentaries, and so he had all of his commentaries loaded down in our car. At the cabin, the main thing that was there was my clothing, and all of my clothing except for just a few pieces of clothing went, because we only had about 2 more weeks to stay in the cabin. And so I just kept back a couple skirts and tops and a couple Sunday dresses, And so so anyway, everything else went onto the moving truck. And then we we drove ahead of the driver of the moving van, and we went down to my parents' house. That was our next stop. And that stop, we picked up another big batch of items. We picked up the quilt. My mom said, "Do you want to open the quilt, or do you want to wait?" And I said, "I'm not going to open it here because we have so many things that are dusty and being moved in and out. I'm just going to leave it wrapped up in the box, and I'll open it when I get down there and get ready to put it on the bed, and I'll I'll either take a photograph of it, or I'll have you come down. You can see it when you visit me." In those days, I carried, it's so crazy to think about, little portable cameras, the little disposable cameras, and I took pictures on those. And then you would drop them in an envelope and mail them in, and they would send you your pictures back. Perfect. And that's how I did pictures all the time. So I told Mom, I'll make some pictures of it. I'll send them off and get them developed. And that way I'll be able to keep a little treasure trove, a photo album of all my little things that I have laid out in my house for my very first house, which was exciting. So we gathered all of those items up. One thing somebody had brought us was an igloo cooler. It was blue and white. I can remember it to this day. It was one of those big ones, I guess they thought we were going camping, and they had brought us some equipment that we could use for a picnic and going camping. But the man that was moving us, he said, "We need to store some of these loose items in here." So he opened it up, and my mom had a few things in the house. She came running out with them. She had the topper to my wedding cake. She had a baby doll that had been made for me by a precious older lady in our church. Her name was Mrs. Wise. She was in her 90s. Oh, she was just such a precious woman of God. And she handcrafted like clay dolls. And she would, I guess put them like in this kiln and then fire them up. And then she would take them out and she would hand paint their eyes and their little mouth. And then she would make their clothing. And they were not huge dolls, like this. And she would make little christening dresses for them. And she would hand stitch everything that went into that dress and into the hat. She would stitch it by hand, and her stitches are absolutely perfect. And she was almost blind, but she said, "I've sewn since I was 8 years old. And she would make these little baby doll clothes. And she had given me a doll that she had made just for me, and it was in a beautiful white bonnet and in a really long, beautiful dress with all this lace. And so we had several loose piece items in the cooler, and the man that was loading the truck said, "That doll has enough, padding. Let's just put, except for her head, she was all cloth. Let's just put her down on top of here, on the top, and she will protect this stuff," because she had a real thick dress on and everything. And so got the cooler on. That was the last thing to go on the truck, and we were ready to go. And we headed down the road, and we led the way. And along the highway, as we were going along, we would come to a weigh station. And you know how it is when you are driving and trucks have to pull off onto the weigh station, and then they have to re-enter the highway after they're weighed. Most of you have experienced seeing those. Well, that's what we had to do with this truck. It was like a transfer truck, and it was loaded with all of our belongings to go to school. And it seemed like it took us forever to get there. It's only about maybe a 3.5 or 4 hour drive, but it seemed like it took all day long because, we had started first of all in my husband's town, driven an hour down to my town where my parents lived. Then we had finally gotten on the road, and we had to go another, 3.5 or 4 hours. And then the driver of this truck had to stop every so often as the weigh stations came up. It just seemed like it took forever. And it was hot that day. It was July, and we were burning up, and our car had no air conditioning. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I had just turned 20, maybe 3 weeks before. I was 19 when I got married, but I had just turned 20 when we were doing this trip. And so we were pumped. We were working for the Lord, and we knew that He was with us. We just looked and saw how He had blessed us. And at one of our very last stops at the Hillsboro Way Station on Interstate 85, that was our last way station. And so the truck pulled up into the way station, and we drove on down the highway just a little bit and then pulled over. And where we pulled over is the place where the trucks would come down off the way station ramp. And when we saw him coming, we would just pull over in front of him and continue driving. And so we are looking in our rearview mirror. We're looking and waiting for him to come down after he's weighed. And we see one truck after another roll down, but our truck is not coming. And my husband got concerned. He said, something's not right, because he should have been down. Some of the trucks that were behind him are rolling down, and there's got to be a problem with the truck. And I said, well, it can't be the weight of it, because we know it wasn't overly weighed down. It had been checked previously. The more we sat there, my husband said, something's wrong. Maybe the driver got sick. I'm going to go up and I'm going to check on him. And I can remember him going up the hill. I was seeing him in my rearview mirror. And as he went up the hill, I was watching him in the rear view, and he topped the hill. He started running. And I thought, well, what in the world is going on? What is going on here? And I got out of the car. I thought, something's not right. And so I went walking with my little skirt on to the top of the hill. When I got to the top of the hill, the truck exploded into fire. Our moving truck exploded into fire. It was like black, hot, rolling smoke was just pouring out of it. It was unbelievable to witness it, because it actually did not explode until I topped the hill. It had already been smoking, and they had gotten out some fire extinguishers and were trying to cool it down, and the driver had pulled open the back doors, and he was going to start pulling things off the truck, because the fire was sort of underneath, and he was going to start unloading some of the items, and he pulled off the cooler, and they were like, get away, we can't contain this fire. And as soon as he stepped away, of course, is when it exploded. And of course, I was seeing this from the other side as I was coming up the hill. And there it went. There it went. Everything that we owned in the world. And we had only been married 2 months, and he might have still been 21. I was 20. He turns 22 in July. I don't think his birthday had come yet. And he was about to turn 22. And we were trying to go to seminary. We were trying to serve God. Everything that anyone had given us, all the furniture we had been saving for months, all the money we had scraped together to buy things, it was gone. It was all gone. And I never got to see the quilt that the sweet lady made for me. How I wish that when Mama said, do you want to open it? I just would have said, yes, I want to open it, because that way I would have been able to see it. I just would have been able to see it and admire it, because she had put months of work into it. Everything that we had was gone. And there we stood. And that was one of those times that I said, Lord, don't you care? Don't you care about me? Can't you see that I'm trying to serve you, and I'm trying to love you with all my heart, and I am doing the things you've asked me to do, and and you are letting this happen to me? Don't you care about me? And friends, I know that you have had something in your life that has happened to you just like that. I'm not the only one. When someone tells you that the person you love more than anything has passed away, when someone says, we're sorry to tell you this, but your child died in a car accident. When someone says, I'm sorry, but you have 3 to 6 months to live. I'm sure you think, Lord, don't you care about me? Don't you love me? Didn't you say you would never leave me? Why have you left me? And friends, I'm here to promise you, just from the bottom of my heart, the Lord cares. He cares so much, and He is doing something so much greater and so much bigger than we can see. He really is. At the time, you don't want to hear it. At the time, you don't want to hear someone say that. You're angry, you're hurting, you're crying inside. You're young, especially if you're young, it's hard. But man, what I learned that day set the course for my life. What I learned that day is that the Lord cares. And what else I learned is that stuff doesn't matter. Stuff does not matter. Breast beds don't matter. Dishes and china, that doesn't matter. All of your clothing, you can replace that. It's no big deal. It's not irreplaceable. Sewing machines that your mama bought you for your wedding. You can replace those things eventually. Don't put your whole life in stuff, because it is a vapor. It will be gone. It can be gone in an instant. But trust in the one who will supply your every need, because everything I ever needed has come from His hand. And I learned that when I was 20 years old. Stuff doesn't matter, because Jesus will give me what I need. And you know what, friends? He did. Now I'm going to share with you a couple of items that are precious to my heart, because I'm so thankful the driver was not injured. I was worried that he was burned in the fire. I was worried he could have died in that explosion. What had happened, some people say, what happened, is that this particular moving truck had a wooden floor bed. A lot of these moving trucks have wooden beds in them. And they had had the exhaust system worked on the week before our move. And the exhaust is supposed to be turned down like this. But when they had been screwing something in, it had become turned upwards, and all of the exhaust, the heat from the engine and the transmission, was all hitting up against the bed of that wooden, the wooden bed of the truck. And so as we drove, the longer we drove, the exhaust was heating up that wooden floor bed. It was heating it up. And so it was a very hot day anyway. It was just so hot. And so that explosion happened because they believe when he stopped at the way station that the truck actually quit giving off so much exhaust, and just that little bit of oxygen caused it to explode like crazy and catch on fire. It was an error by the mechanics who had worked on this truck. We did get some insurance money. We got some, and it helped us. It helped us to kind of, get a few other pieces. We had some people that came in and helped us to get more furniture. A couple of the churches, the church where my husband pastored, the church where my dad pastored, they came together and helped us to get some furniture and things to get on our feet. And we surely do appreciate that. And I'll never forget those people. And I was just really thankful that day that the driver hadn't died, because that, the loss of life is the most important thing. But he was okay. He was not even injured. I think he was shaken up, but he wasn't injured. But the thing that he pulled off the truck before it exploded was the cooler. And inside the cooler were several place settings of my china wrapped up in bubble wrap, but because he took the, the cooler and slung it against the ground as he was trying to start slinging things off before they made him get away, it busted all of my china, and so it did not survive. My sweet maternal grandmother bought me some china. She bought me some china. Bless her. And sweet things that your loved ones do for you when you're hurting. But I'm going to show you some things that are precious because they were in the cooler. They were in the cooler. My cake topper for my wedding cake was in the cooler. Here it is. Now, I've shown you this piece before in that case, but I never told you the story about it. It's aged quite a bit and also has some yellowing and damage. This is all damage from the fire. It crushed inside of that, inside of the igloo cooler. But there it is. And there's the bride and the groom. They're still holding on to each other. So sweet. And then I'll show you this. And I treasure this. This is one of my treasures. The baby doll that Mrs. Wise made for me was broken. She was made of clay. Her face was made of clay. And I think her little feet might have been made of clay. But she was all broken up into little tiny pieces and couldn't be fixed. But I took off her dress, and it was had a little bit of smoke damage on it. But I worked and worked to get it clean. I used bleach and everything else I could find. And I thought I would show you the dress from the baby doll that Mrs. Wise made for me 33 years ago. She has long since passed. And you can see that it's got ribbon running through here. See, it's got a little bow on it. And I mean, she really knew how to sew. I want you to look at these tiny buttons on the back of this. Look at that. Just amazing. Every one of these little stitches that she made is absolutely perfect, and she did it all by hand. Let's see if I wish you could see the stitches. All of those little gathers in there were done by hand. So I took this little dress and I had it put up for a long time. I had it wrapped up in some tissue paper, and in the following years, my husband found me something that I had been wanting for a really long time, and that was a washstand. I'd always wanted an antique washstand. I think they're so pretty. And none of us had a lot of money back when we lived in the mountains, so we traded off work, and we refinished furniture for a man who said, if you refinish these chairs for my dining room suite, I will give you this old washstand out of the barn. And so then we did, and then we took the old washstand and we refinished it, and this is where this dress hangs now, on this washstand over here. I wonder if I can turn my camera and let you see. Over there on that washstand, right there. I hang it up over there. I'm gonna take it over there. So there you go, friends. There's my pretty remembrance. And you know what I think about when I see it? I don't think about the pain of losing everything. I don't think about the agony of having to start over when we just had gotten started. What I think about is that God is faithful. He is so faithful. He allowed me to keep something that Mrs. Wise made for me. He allowed me to keep something from my wedding day. And he taught me a valuable lesson that I don't think anything else could teach me such a great lesson as I learned that day. And that is that people are always, always more important than stuff. And that Jesus is more important than anyone. So friends, that was my thought when I read this chapter, because when I saw those words, Lord, don't you care? I thought about that time in my life when I really cried out those words, and I was able to find out that yes, he cares. So what thing is it that you have had happen in your life that has made you cry these words? Is it something over your children? Is it something over your health or your finances? Is it over your marriage, a friendship? All of us have something. And you know what, friends? The Lord can use it for his good and his glory. He can make something beautiful from ashes. I've seen him do it. Now, in our questions, there was one question that I thought I would like for you guys to do in the back, because there's a whole list of questions, and I'm sure you've answered some of these, but down at the bottom it says, write a letter to Jesus beginning with, Lord, I know you love me because, and then list the ways that you know that Jesus loves you. Oh, I love that. I could go on and on all day telling you why Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me enough to let me learn important lessons. He loves me enough to discipline me. He loves me enough to supply my needs. I mean, I could go on and on about all the reasons that I know that Jesus loves me. Friends, it is a joy to spend time with you. I always, always look forward to it. I hope that you're enjoying the book, Having a Mary Heart and a Martha World. Next week, we will be back with chapter 3. And in this chapter, it is called The Diagnosis. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. And friends, there are so many things to get worried and upset over in this world. Would you not agree? So I think next week we will have a wonderful time talking about this chapter. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.